You've been learning European Portuguese for a while now. You can order a café, you can ask where the casa de banho is, you can even complain about the chuva with something resembling conviction. And then you have to say não, and suddenly people are not sure if you're speaking the language or if you have pastel de nata crumbs stuck in your throat. Let's talk about nasal sounds, because they are, without a doubt, the moment most learners quietly consider giving up and taking up gardening instead. Portuguese nasal vowels are relatively rare in most learners' native languages, which is why your mouth simply refuses to cooperate at first. The trick, if you can call it that, is that air needs to escape through your nose while you're saying the vowel, not just through your mouth. English speakers tend to either ignore this entirely, producing something that sounds vaguely Spanish, or overcorrect so hard that pão comes out sounding like they want something very different. Neither is correct, but the second one at least shows effort. The classic offenders are oi, em, and combinations like em, on. Take mão. Say it with your mouth only and you'll get something closer to mau, which is, to a Portuguese ear, a different word entirely. The nasal quality isn't decoration, it's load-bearing. Drop it and the word doesn't sound right, turns into another word, or can even become incomprehensible. And then there's não itself, the word every learner uses roughly 400 times a day. Usually the first word anyone actually manages to say with real nasal commitment, mostly because you hear it so often you eventually absorb it by osmosis rather than by trying. That moment when you realize that, before, you had been saying now, obrigado, whenever a waiter asked if you wanted the English menu instead. Here's a small comfort. Portuguese people will understand you even if your nasal vowels are a bit flat. Most of the time. They've had centuries of practice understanding foreigners mangling this. But there's a difference between being understood and being understood without a 3-second pause where they recalibrate what you just said. That pause is the tell. If you actually want to fix this rather than just live with the pause, the trick that works for most people is embarrassingly low-tech. Pinch your nose while saying a nasal word like não or mãe. If the sound doesn't change, if you don't feel your nose struggling to vibrate against the pinch, you weren't doing it right. You were faking it with your mouth alone. Do this a few times a day with a short list of words, and your mouth eventually learns what correct is supposed to feel like, rather than what it merely sounds like from the outside. Humming the vowel first with your mouth closed before opening it into the full word also helps, since it forces the air through your nose before your mouth has a chance to hijack the sound. Now onto consonants, where things get quietly sadistic in a different way. The letter combination LH is not an L followed by an H. It's a single sound. Not exactly like it, but close to the LLI in the English word million, which I can't pronounce properly, your time to mock my accent. And it shows up in words like trabalho and filho. Learners who treat it as two separate letters end up producing something that sounds like they're trying to say the word underwater. Similarly, NH isn't N plus H. It's one nasalish palatal sound heard in manhã and sonho. Put the two together, an LH next to an NH in a longer word, and you've got yourself a genuine test of character. A useful shortcut for both. Start with the English words that already contain something close. Million gets you most of the way to LH, and if you slow that word down and isolate the middle sound, you can transplant it straight into trabalho or filho. For NH, the NY in canyon does the same job, slowed down and dropped into manhã or sonho. The goal isn't to think about tongue placement, which tends to make it worse, but to borrow a sound your mouth already knows how to make and just relocate it. The result won't be perfection, but it will be close enough and you'll have time to work on it. Then there's the European S, which changes its personality depending on where it lands in a word. And this is the part that quietly separates people who learned from a Brazilian teacher from people who learned in Portugal, sometimes without either party realizing why the accent still feels slightly off. At the end of a word or before certain consonants, that S softens into something closer to sh. So, português doesn't end in an S sound, not really. It trails off into something that would look, if you wrote it out phonetically, suspiciously like Portuguese people are constantly shushing each other. The fix here is mostly about noticing rather than producing. Take a word like português, and instead of trying to force an English S onto the end, just let your tongue relax back slightly and let some air hiss out the sides, closer to sh than to a hard S. Practicing final position S words specifically, mais, dois, depois, rather than S sounds in general, trains the pattern faster because it isolates exactly the position that trips people up. There's also the matter of unstressed vowels vanishing almost entirely in European Portuguese, which is its own special punishment for anyone who learned to read the language before learning to hear it spoken at native speed. Words that look perfectly reasonable on paper, full of vowels, generous even, get compressed in speech until half the syllables seem to have been quietly removed by someone with a fanatic bias towards consonants. This is, incidentally, the single biggest reason European Portuguese sounds so different from Brazilian Portuguese, despite using largely the same words. Brazilians tend to pronounce the vowels the page promised you. Portugal did not agree to those terms. For this one, reading won't save you, only listening will. Find short clips of European Portuguese speech, slow them down if your app allows it, and shadow them. Repeat each phrase immediately after hearing it, matching the rhythm rather than the spelling. You're not trying to memorize which vowels disappear, since that list is long and inconsistent. You're trying to retrain your ear to expect compression, so that when you eventually speak, your mouth compresses along with it instead of dutifully pronouncing every vowel. None of this is really about talent. It's about repetition, and specifically repetition of the kind where you're not just reading words, but actually hearing them out loud at the speed real people use them until your mouth stops treating like a threat and starts treating it like a friendly sound it has always known. Let me know in the comments what Portuguese sounds are more difficult for you, or you can try to teach me to pronounce months in English. Go ahead. Want to learn Portuguese, or are you here just to look at the pet platypus? Then try this course. I made it. In it, I explain the basics of the language and also the really complicated things, like when to use the imperfect instead of the perfect, the difference between para and por, or the 700 different meanings of the verb ficar. I also included more things for you, like a section to improve your comprehension with text to read, audio to listen to, or videos to watch. Tired of courses that copy school textbooks, pretend they are Duolingo, or are just overpriced ego trips for their authors? Give this one a go! It's full of clear and straight-to-the-point explanations of how the language works, with lots of audio examples. And every subscription gets a free Ronaldo bust. Join now! Por favor.